All right, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for our practical forecasting webinar. We'll get things started in just a few minutes. While we wait for those trickling in, I just want to go over a few housekeeping things to make today's session run as smooth as possible. First, if you have your sound off, now is the time to turn it on so you can hear myself and the presenter, Ben Cooper. I also want to let you know that your audio and video is disabled for the duration of the webinar, so no stress about either one of these things turning on. We have taken care of this for you in the back end. I have noted here that you can turn off other apps or close out tabs in your browser to help viewing experience. Please note there is no need to do this if the quality is working just fine for you. But in the instance this video or audio is lagging, blurry, or glitchy, I'd recommend exiting out of some screens. Lastly, if you have any questions throughout today's presentation, please drop them in the Q&A box at any point, and we will take some time at the end of this webinar to address those questions as best we can. With that, let's get going. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Shale Cleveland, and I'm an account manager here at Fathom. In this month's product webinar, I've invited Ben Cooper, our forecasting guru, to share some of his knowledge about forecasting in Fathom. He will be addressing the big questions business owners and stakeholders ask using forecasting and walking us through his process of using forecasting with clients to take the guesswork out of the numbers. Some of you are new to the software, so I'll begin by addressing what Fathom is. Fathom is an all-in-one business performance reporting, analysis, and cash flow forecasting tool that empowers both business owners and advisors to make the best possible financial decisions. Fathom combines actionable financial insights, customizable reports, and business planning into one smart solution. Today, we're going to be deep diving into practical forecasting. Why? Because we want to answer the questions that keep you and your clients up at night, the how-tos and the what-if questions that Fathom can provide clear, practical answers for. For an agenda today, we'll be addressing the challenges advisors and business owners face, asking the most common questions, and giving you a glimpse of what practical forecasting is so you can better serve your clients and your businesses. Here at Fathom, we're dedicated to identifying the common problems that many accountants, advisors, and business owners face. Things like data overload, complex forecasting tools, manual data management, and lack of clarity are all problems we've addressed through our platform to help you not only save time in your work, but also to create meaningful, more powerful deliverables for your clients. There are a number of forecasting benefits that Ben will get into more fully in a few minutes, but to give you an understanding of why we created this tool in the first place, we believe forecasting can create better conversations, improve understanding, aid in making informed decisions, and create consistent, valuable engagement with both clients and stakeholders. Now for the fun part, let's get into the product. I'm going to pass the baton over to Ben Cooper, founder of Amplify, to show you the real magic of forecasting. At the end of his demonstration, feel free to stick around for a Q&A with Ben, or if you need to run, drop your questions and we'll do our best to address them. So it'll be in our follow-up email with a recording of this webinar. Over to you, Ben.
Awesome. Thank you, Shale. I'm so excited to be here today and grateful to have some time together to talk about one of my favorite things, which is the future. And especially for business owners, one thing that I see being so important as we talk about forecasting is when you get into the month after month, year over year kind of grind of running a business, it's easy to start to lose sight of the initial imagination maybe that you had when you started your business and sort of the potential growth opportunities that might exist. But when it's hard to answer some of the complicated questions that might be keeping you up at night, there are a lot of moving parts around some of these decisions. I see an opportunity using the Fathom forecasting tool to really reignite the imagination for business owners. And so I'm excited to kind of get into how we do that, how we walk through, answering some of these complicated questions and how we use the Fathom tool to create some really dynamic conversations with business owners. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And the first thing that you're going to see here is the report section. So what we'll be walking through today are essentially three components. The first is we want to talk about the general question of when can I afford to fill in the blank. And you'll see a handful of items here that we're going to go one by one through. When can we afford to hire a marketing agency, rebrand and create a new website, make some hiring decisions, maybe launch a new product that would kind of generate some new revenue? When can we afford to purchase a new building, a new location? When can we afford to, as a business owner, maybe take a larger draw each month? So there's some pieces that we'll walk through there, and then we'll jump into some scenarios and drivers that we can start to ask some of the questions. What happens if we were to raise prices or see our cost of goods go up, experience maybe higher churn, or accelerate some of the growth decisions and investments into the future potential of the business? What if we were to move forward with some of those decisions sooner? So there's a lot to look at here. I don't want to overwhelm anybody, but we'll be going line by line here in the next 30 minutes or so. And then we'll land the plane here talking about the way we can stay on track. So how do you every month look at the numbers in a meaningful way that helps you as a business owner really understand whether or not you're moving in the right direction? And so we'll go through our measure, adjust, predict review together. So let's start back up at the top. So what you see here is the roadmap feature. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the roadmap. And what you'll see is a number of individual decisions. So what I love about the roadmap is it really creates a compelling and beautiful timeline of decisions and the sequence of events maybe that you might be considering as a business owner. Now, really, if you're an advisor to business owners, really the most important question that you can ask the business owner, the client that you're serving, is, what do you want? What do you hope for in the next 12 months? You'll see this as a time frame here, 2025. We're looking ahead at the next 12 months. What are the decisions that, as a business owner, you would love to see become a reality? And usually what ends up happening is there is a list of things that a business owner would love to move forward with, but it's not always clear which order it makes sense to do them, and really all the variables that are kind of bundled together with each of these individual decisions, it can be overwhelming. So when we talk about practical forecasting, answering the questions that can keep you up at night, it's these sorts of decisions. When can we move forward with a rebrand? When can we move forward with hiring a new salesperson? There are moving parts that within each of these line items, we're able to tie together the incoming and outgoing decisions on the profit and loss balance sheet and be able to see, really how multiple variables play together. And so we'll just start at the top here. So the way we love to think about each of these decisions is by mapping out essentially what happens with this company. Now I'll zoom back out here and just give you an overview. I love hot sauce. So what we're going to be talking about here is hot sauce business. And if you want to see how we actually
All right, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for our practical forecasting webinar. We'll get things started in just a few minutes. While we wait for those trickling in, I just want to go over a few housekeeping things to make today's session run as smooth as possible. First, if you have your sound off, now is the time to turn it on so you can hear myself and the presenter, Ben Cooper. I also want to let you know that your audio and video is disabled for the duration of the webinar, so no stress about either one of these things turning on. We have taken care of this for you in the back end. I have noted here that you can turn off other apps or close out tabs in your browser to help viewing experience. Please note there is no need to do this if the quality is working just fine for you. But in the instance this video or audio is lagging, blurry, or glitchy, I'd recommend exiting out of some screens. Lastly, if you have any questions throughout today's presentation, please drop them in the Q&A box at any point, and we will take some time at the end of this webinar to address those questions as best we can. With that, let's get going. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Shale Cleveland, and I'm an account manager here at Fathom. In this month's product webinar, I've invited Ben Cooper, our forecasting guru, to share some of his knowledge about forecasting in Fathom. He will be addressing the big questions business owners and stakeholders ask using forecasting and walking us through his process of using forecasting with clients to take the guesswork out of the numbers. Some of you are new to the software, so I'll begin by addressing what Fathom is. Fathom is an all-in-one business performance reporting, analysis, and cash flow forecasting tool that empowers both business owners and advisors to make the best possible financial decisions. Fathom combines actionable financial insights, customizable reports, and business planning into one smart solution. Today, we're going to be deep diving into practical forecasting. Why? Because we want to answer the questions that keep you and your clients up at night, the how-tos and the what-if questions that Fathom can provide clear, practical answers for. For an agenda today, we'll be addressing the challenges advisors and business owners face, asking the most common questions, and giving you a glimpse of what practical forecasting is so you can better serve your clients and your businesses. Here at Fathom, we're dedicated to identifying the common problems that many accountants, advisors, and business owners face. Things like data overload, complex forecasting tools, manual data management, and lack of clarity are all problems we've addressed through our platform to help you not only save time in your work, but also to create meaningful, more powerful deliverables for your clients. There are a number of forecasting benefits that Ben will get into more fully in a few minutes, but to give you an understanding of why we created this tool in the first place, we believe forecasting can create better conversations, improve understanding, aid in making informed decisions, and create consistent, valuable engagement with both clients and stakeholders. Now for the fun part, let's get into the product. I'm going to pass the baton over to Ben Cooper, founder of Amplify, to show you the real magic of forecasting. At the end of his demonstration, feel free to stick around for a Q&A with Ben, or if you need to run, drop your questions and we'll do our best to address them. So it'll be in our follow-up email with a recording of this webinar. Over to you, Ben.
Awesome. Thank you, Shale. I'm so excited to be here today and grateful to have some time together to talk about one of my favorite things, which is the future. And especially for business owners, one thing that I see being so important as we talk about forecasting is when you get into the month after month, year over year kind of grind of running a business, it's easy to start to lose sight of the initial imagination maybe that you had when you started your business and sort of the potential growth opportunities that might exist. But when it's hard to answer some of the complicated questions that might be keeping you up at night, there are a lot of moving parts around some of these decisions. I see an opportunity using the Fathom forecasting tool to really reignite the imagination for business owners. And so I'm excited to kind of get into how we do that, how we walk through, answering some of these complicated questions and how we use the Fathom tool to create some really dynamic conversations with business owners. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And the first thing that you're going to see here is the report section. So what we'll be walking through today are essentially three components. The first is we want to talk about the general question of when can I afford to fill in the blank? And you'll see a handful of items here that we're going to go one by one through. When can we afford to hire a marketing agency, rebrand and create a new website, make some hiring decisions, maybe launch a new product that would kind of generate some new revenue? When can we afford to purchase a new building, a new location? When can we afford to, as a business owner, maybe take a larger draw each month? So there's some pieces that we'll walk through there, and then we'll jump into some scenarios and drivers that we can start to ask some of the questions. What happens if we were to raise prices or see our cost of goods go up, experience maybe higher churn, or accelerate some of the the growth decisions and investments into the future potential of the business, what if we were to move forward with some of those decisions sooner? So there's a lot to look at here. I don't want to overwhelm anybody, but we'll be going line by line here in the next 30 minutes or so. And then we'll land the plane here talking about the way we can stay on track. So how do you every month look at the numbers in a meaningful way that helps you as a business owner really understand whether or not you're moving in the right direction? And so we'll go through our measure, adjust, predict review together. So let's start back up at the top. So what you see here is the roadmap feature. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the roadmap. And what you'll see is a number of individual decisions. So what I love about the roadmap is it really creates a compelling and beautiful timeline of decisions and the sequence of events maybe that you might be considering as a business owner. Now, really, if you're an advisor to business owners, really the most important question that you can ask the business owner, the client that you're serving, is, what do you want? What do you hope for in the next 12 months? You'll see this as a time frame here, 2025. We're looking ahead at the next 12 months. What are the decisions that as a business owner you would love to see become a reality? And usually what ends up happening is there is a list of things that a business owner would love to move forward with, but it's not always clear which order it makes sense to do them, and really all the variables that are kind of bundled together with each of these individual decisions, it can be overwhelming. So when we talk about practical forecasting, answering the questions that can keep you up at night, it's these sorts of decisions. When can we move forward with a rebrand? When can we move forward with hiring a new salesperson? There are moving parts that within each of these line items, we're able to tie together the incoming and outgoing decisions on the profit and loss balance sheet and be able to see, really how multiple variables play together. And so we'll just start at the top here. So the way we love to think about each of these decisions is by mapping out essentially what happens with this company. Now I'll zoom back out here and just give you an overview. I love hot sauce. So what we're going to be talking about here is hot sauce business. And if you want to see how we actually built this demo, there's a 3-part webinar series that we did with the Fathom team where we walk through ready, set, go. We talk about building this same demo forecast from scratch. So you can see essentially how we built this out. But one thing that's important as we think about each of these decisions is hiring a marketing agency, for instance, doesn't just include outgoing expense. There's also the incoming revenue that might tie into bringing in a new marketing agency. So what I love about the micro forecast component here is it allows us to see the incoming revenue, outgoing expenses, and be able to even reference some of these drivers in the marketing assumptions that we might be needing to consider as we make investments into this. So a marketing agency, for instance, we're looking at investing marketing dollars. Now, this is a driver that we've created, and I'll click over there just so you can see what this looks like. But basically, when we have the ability to map out all of these underlying assumptions as we think about growth, one of the assumptions you might be facing as you think about investing money in marketing is, how much do we invest? What's the return on that investment? And how is that going to translate into revenue? So with this micro forecast specifically, we have a certain marketing investment, and then we are able to tie that marketing spend, multiply it by the return on ad spend that we expect, and that creates the revenue that we would expect to come through this decision, and then also tie together the cost of goods that would associate to that incoming revenue. So just as a quick capturing of 3 moving parts that tie to that marketing agency. I'm going to fly through these just so we stay on track here. But essentially, we're able to look at another decision, which is just outgoing. What would happen if we rebrand and kind of create a new website? Now, a lot of times there's upfront investment, there's ongoing expenses, and so we're able to make a lump sum investment in the first month and then see ongoing expenses. The nice thing, again, as we look at these metrics, we're able to actually tie the timing of these. We're able to drag these around. This is one of my favorite things that creates a dynamic conversation with clients, is we're able to drag these around in real time and be able to see the impact on something like cash on hand or revenue or operating profit. So it's a really compelling place to be able to have a meaningful conversation, and the light bulb goes off for business owners as we're looking at, mapping out some of these decisions. I want to jump down to a decision around hiring someone. So when we think about hiring a new vice president position, for instance, this is something where we have wages and salaries, and then we have, connected expenses that are going to be tied to that investment in a new hire, like benefits and payroll taxes. And so the important thing that we're able to do here is create a formula that ties, we're going to spend $15,000 a month on wages and salaries, and a percentage of that is going to be reflected in benefits, payroll taxes, corporate tax. The neat thing with this that I found to be really helpful is when you create a structure like this, like a new hire, for instance, instead of creating another, let's say you're going to hire another person, once you create this structure, it's easy to hit this duplicate button and come in, and you've got this existing structure in place. So one thing that I just want to encourage everyone to do, especially if you're just getting familiar with the Fathom tool, is create a base kind of model structure, and then you're able to duplicate it and apply different, even different pay amounts. So just for instance, if this second hire is going to be, not $15,000, but it's going to be a $12,500 a month commitment. When I create this rule, what you'll see is that all of these benefits and payroll taxes are going to update accordingly, because we created these formula relationships in the initial micro forecast. So I'll just get rid of this. But as we go through hiring decisions, a VP hire may just be an outgoing expense, but when you have a wholesale person, for instance, you might have a couple new components in this hire that are unique. And one of the things that might play in here is that they are going to generate new revenue for the business, but maybe not right away. So you might have a base pay that looks similar to the VP role, where there's just kind of a fixed amount that you're investing into that person in that role. But then there's maybe a commission component that kicks in once a new amount of revenue comes in. And so the neat thing is you're able to create these formulas in a way that, as you're considering a decision around hiring somebody like a salesperson who's going to offset their own costs, obviously at some point, what we're able to see here down at the bottom of the screen is the cash on hand position that exists with this one decision of hiring someone. So you can see that at the beginning, you are investing into getting this person up and running, but then over time, that cash position becomes positive, and you can see exactly when you would expect, with some of these assumptions, to break even and become profitable in that one decision. So we find this to be a very helpful tool in just understanding the break even around a single decision. Now, one thing that I'm going to jump down to, expansion. You might be thinking about investing in a new building. With a new building comes hiring a new team. So what you could bundle all of this together into one, but I wanted to keep the new warehouse team that is going to come on board when that new warehouse opens, just as an example of, just showing that you can actually say, hey, to hire this whole team, it's going to be much larger than just one position. And so you can kind of group things together, but keep some of the same payroll taxes and benefits connected there. So I'll just jump over to this capital investment. Like if you were imagining expanding to a new location and opening a whole new warehouse, there are a lot of moving parts with this that, especially if you're taking out a loan. I'm just going to expand this out. And I know I'm flying through a lot of this stuff, but write down your questions if you want. We can knock them out in the Q&A time. But I wanted to make sure that we're kind of diving into some of this really detailed information. So let's say you're purchasing a new location, and there are going to be some operating expenses that are tied to this, like utilities. One thing that is very helpful is that there's the ability to schedule how the assets are going to be depreciated, or how you will make payments on some of the loans. So what we have here is a situation where it's a $2.5 million purchase, and we're going to put 20% down in cash. So what we can see here is that we have $500,000 coming out of the cash account. And then we have the remaining $2 million coming out of getting put on a loan. And this loan is, I'll click over to this here in a second, right here. So this schedule is, there's a really handy tool when you're doing something like a long-term asset, where you can click through and assign the principal amount, the terms that you'll be paying, and be able to map out and calculate some of the interest and principal payments over something like a 30-year loan in a way that that makes life a lot easier to map out, for a business owner who's thinking about a big decision like opening a new location. And so there are a lot of moving parts within this, but again, one thing I love is if you're thinking about opening a second location or a third warehouse, then it's just as simple as duplicating this, and you can see, that $500,000 cash drop, moves with this micro forecast. So it's very handy to be able to map all of these out into a single line item and be able to drag them around and see what's possible. Down to the final two micro forecasts here. If we're going to do a new product launch, we like to look at, maybe there's an investment in inventory that is going to, come out of cash, and we have to invest more in inventory just to get a startup amount of this new product. But once we get up and running, then we're going to be able to see new revenue come through as a result. And again, this break even just tied to this single decision, we're able to see this play out over the coming months and see how soon we would expect to be generating new revenue just from this one decision to launch a new product. And then finally, just as an owner, if you're considering moving more cash out of the business on a monthly basis, then there's a simple way to be able to map this and just increase the owner's draw as a schedule that increases $15,000 a month in this example. But the powerful thing with all of this is that we're able to see all of these different decisions mapped out in the profit and loss, and also in the balance sheet. So just as I expand some of these out, you'll see some familiar decisions on marketing agency, new product launch. There's revenue that we have expected to come in just tied to these decisions, and then some cost of goods components. You're going to open, these are new hires, we're opening a new location. All of these, it's a really powerful way to just say, hey, where does that new expense roll in as we talk about launching a new location or hiring a new person onto the team? And it's not just on the profit and loss statement, it's also over in the balance sheet. We're able to see the impact of, just on cash or assets or payables even. So there's a lot here that I just jumped into, just talking through some of the micro forecasts and roadmap. But the powerful thing that I wanted to highlight is when we map each of these individual things, it's like we're taking, I almost picture a business owner's got a heavy backpack that they're wearing, and each of these things is just a big rock that we're kind of taking out, that's weighing them down, because there's a lot of information that is just floating around in their head with each of these decisions. So the power of being able to untangle that and be able to lay it out in a very clear roadmap is really powerful. And then one of the things that I love to, that I see being really exciting for business owners as well, is to be able to say, okay, this is the timeline that you've considered. Now, what would happen if we, if revenue is better or our cash position is better, what would happen if we accelerated some of these decisions? And so this kind of rolls into now the power of using scenarios within Fathom, because we've created this baseline story. This is a narrative that we've mapped out here that we can look forward to following as we grow. But there's also an opportunity to maybe accelerate some of these decisions and move forward with some of these opportunities sooner. So the way we can do this is within scenarios, you'll see a handful of things here that are I've already created. But basically what we're able to do is within the roadmap, we can activate a different scenario. And I'll click over to the faster growth timeline just so you can see how all of these refresh and move forward. But the powerful thing with scenarios is within each different, think of a scenario almost as a different version. I heard somebody describe it as like a multiverse. It's almost like we get to choose our own adventure. So we're kind of creating a different version of the same business. It's like a simulator of sorts. And we're able to say, okay, from here moving forward, what if we did this, sequence of events instead of the original? And so when we move something within an activated scenario, it stays preserved within that game plan. So instead of a business owner needing to try things out in real time and cross their fingers and hope that they're making wise decisions, what we see being really powerful is that we're able to show them the impact of all of these decisions in real time, ahead of when they would actually bump into a combination of decisions that might take them in a negative cash position that they don't want to go. So what I'll scroll down and show you real quick is with scenarios, we're able to compare different combinations of events. And so you see this baseline forecast, and then we have a faster expansion. And what I want to highlight here is just one visual that shows the cash on hand position of these two storylines overlaid. And so the reason this is so powerful is because we can see that in our faster expansion, our cash position, definitely dips below and it trails, but these investments are allowing us to maybe get in a better revenue position, for instance. So I'll scroll down now into the different scenarios, and you'll see not just the blue lines here that are the base and accelerated base forecast, but you'll see also some yellow and a couple red. And so we like to think in terms of, blue kind of being the baseline trajectory, gold being like, this is really good, this is where we want to go if possible. And then red is a little bit like, we want to maybe, caution that direction. So those tend to be a little bit more of a lower kind of growth scenario or cash position scenario. And so what you'll see here is those same baselines, but then we can move into a little bit of the consideration of, okay, here we know all the decisions we want to move forward with. So what can we do to maybe accelerate that? Like what puts us in the best position? And specifically, what happens if we raise our prices? What happens if we see our costs go up? What happens if we see that as we grow, we need to hire more people than we expect? And so these are just practical ways that we like to kind of tie these in using scenarios. The way that we do that is, if you remember in the driver's section, we have a handful of variables that we've identified that, give us the controls that we want to have from a revenue per unit, cost of goods per unit, churn per month, the types of controls that we want to have available to be able to push the model in different directions. So what you're seeing here in all these lines is essentially the baseline picture, and then we go into the driver section and change one of the assumptions or two of the assumptions and get a feel for what happens if. This is one of the most powerful applications of the Fathom tool that we see, is that we're able to create a range of potential outcomes looking ahead into the future. None of us can predict the future perfectly, but what we can do is narrow the region of darkness. So we look ahead, it may feel confusing and it's like we're totally guessing, but knowing a solid baseline model of the business allows us to say, okay, well, here's, based on all of our experience and the way we understand revenue and expenses and profitability to work together, here's what might happen if, for instance, we raise prices. So this yellow line, this first thing, you can see it across here. If we're able to raise prices, then we're going to see that obviously, well, I'll start down here. The first place to see it is revenue is going to go up, obviously, right? So we're going to see revenue go up, profitability go up. Ultimately, cash on hand is going to be in its best spot if all we do is come over to the driver section and see, I'll highlight the line here so we can see it. But if we go over to increase prices, you'll see this number, this value changes, and it rolls through into the predicted revenue for the business and the profit and loss statement. So what that allows us to do then is see just one change on increasing prices gives us some confidence on, well, man, if we can capture more dollars per unit by just raising our prices, let's go for it. But then there's the concern of, well, won't that mean we might lose more customers if we're raising prices? And so the second yellow line here, it's faded, and I know it may be hard to see a little bit, but the second yellow line is another scenario where we've said, okay, we're going to increase price, but we're going to also include a higher churn. So we're assuming that we're going to lose some customers because we're raising prices. What that allows us to understand, we can play with some of these variables now to then say, okay, how many customers could we afford to lose by raising prices and still end up in a better cash position? So you can see how this yellow line is right there. I'll show you just a quick example. If we activate this, we're going to have increased prices, higher churn. What we're able to do here is come in and edit this and say, well, what if we lose 30% of our customers, of subscribers every month? And I can change this, and I can come back here, and if I just refresh this, then what we'll see is that we're going to find that yellow line has moved down slightly, right? So we start to creep, and actually we can see first in the revenue projection here that we're all of a sudden dipping below the spot where we would be on track if we just kept prices as they are. So the interesting thing is here, we might dip in revenue, but if you notice up here, our profitability is still higher than the existing trajectory. So we're able to play with some of these complicated combinations of variables that allow us to see exactly how many customers we might be able to afford to lose if we increase prices. And those are the complicated questions. Again, like if you're nervous about changing prices, a lot of times it's because you don't have the ability to actually do the math in a tool like Fathom, like I'm showing you, where you're able to see the relationship between some of these variables working together and view it through a lens like, okay, we're just going to, like, all we care about is our cash health. We're going to make all these decisions and then compare them together through the cash lens. So that's the power of even just this one visual alone. It helps business owners see, okay, here's the direction we want to go then. We do want to raise prices. What we can monitor is how high our churn is, for instance. So I'll jump down to the bottom here just as a quick example, at the bottom of this report, just because what I want to show you is we might say, okay, we're going to move forward with raising prices. What we need to monitor as a KPI is our churn. So one of the powerful things that we're able to look at is, what is our churn versus our target? So this is where, again, being able to merge non-financial KPIs with financial numbers is really powerful. So just to tie together, as a business owner says, okay, here's directionally where we want to go. What do we need to pay attention to make sure we stay on track? The other two scenarios I just want to highlight are essentially what would happen if our costs go up and revenue struggles compared to what we expect. That's this dark red line. And then the other red line is basically, okay, well, what happens if revenue is really, really good, but we realize that we have to staff a lot more people than we expected? And just as I'll show you just real quick in the roadmap, what this looks like. And essentially, I showed earlier how we can duplicate and add more hires. This is an example where we would have multiple VPs coming onto the team, multiple entire warehouse teams coming together. And so each of these has its own bundle of numbers that, if we're having to hire more to support the growth that we're experiencing through increased prices and increased revenue, then here's the position we might find ourselves in, where we're just kind of plateauing from a cash position. So the power of building the models in a way that gives us access to the key components and being able to not just combine variables, but then present it in a very visual way. To me, that's the most powerful opportunity that I want every business owner to have access to these insights using Fathom. It's just, it's a game changer, because otherwise you're just staring at financial tables, or you're trying to read, some export from, QuickBooks or Xero or some financial statement. And I don't feel anything when I look at a financial table. So what this allows us to do is, view numbers in a much more compelling way, and be able to very easily see the impact of making decisions and how that accumulates in something like cash on hand. So the final thing we want to jump into real quick is just how we stay on track. So we follow a simple acronym called Measure, Adjust, Predict, where once we decide on the path that we want to move forward, and what we decide, like, this is what we want to kind of benchmark against month over month, then what we're able to do is save that forecast as our budget. And we're simply able to start with what we call the measure step, which is a budget versus actual comparison. So what Fathom allows us to do is see the dollar and percentage difference of what happened versus what we thought was going to happen, and then be able to then just have a conversation with the business owner and be able to say, okay, what's going on with some of these numbers? What's the story here? Why was rent $800 less than what we expected? And what we find in those conversations, even though that sounds really simple, there's usually an opportunity to adjust something within the underlying model. So based on what we find in the measure step, then we're able to go back into the underlying model, make some adjustments, and then the final step, once we say, okay, here's now, based on everything we know today in the business, every month we learn new things with every business we're walking with, but based on everything we know to be true today, here's what the future looks like. So we're able to zoom back out and predict what the future months and years might look like from from not just a revenue standpoint, but also you can see these future annual revenue, profitability, cash on hand, these types of things. So that allows us to have a meaningful rhythm. It's amazing to me how many businesses don't actually have a good habit of reviewing the financials every month. And I think Fathom, specifically using a report like this, Fathom creates a really exciting way to interact with the numbers, and a really meaningful opportunity to have a continually rolling forecast that gives you the confidence that you're actually on track and not just guessing as you move month to month. And the final piece here, like I showed earlier, is just identifying the KPIs that are really helpful to track. One bit of encouragement, there are some amazing templates that you can kind of pull a lot of things into your reports. I would just encourage you to be very discerning and very picky on what you want to display, because it's tempting and easy to kind of just throw a bunch of things onto the report. What we've found is that it's better to actually start from scratch. And the reason we do that is because we know that whatever we're adding to the report is something that we know deserves to be there. And it's not just something because it looks pretty. So I would just encourage you to be very intentional with what you choose to measure. And again, it comes back to that initial question that I highlighted at the beginning, which is, as a business owner, what do you want? Like, what is the plan that you hope to see play out in your business? As soon as we can capture that, then we can understand the business in a way that allows us to make decisions that accelerate your ability to see that game plan come to life and come to fruition. So I'm a big fan of Fathom, obviously. I want every business owner to experience the clarity and peace of mind that can come from having a clear picture of their numbers. So With that, I'll hand it back over to the Fathom team. You're muted.
Oh, okay, there we go. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. I'm going to go ahead and put that back on. Awesome. Thanks so much for the information, Ben. So much good stuff in there that is both actionable and practical for advisors to start acting upon, especially seeing your map review process. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you to everyone for sticking around.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate you being here today. Sorry for the technical difficulties and the restart there. We're still not quite sure what happened, but really apologize for that. And just wanted to thank everyone for your time being here today with us. We are going to do some live Q&A. So I'm going to bring in Ben. And we'll kick things off. Hey, Ben.
Hello.
All right. So we got a fair number of questions. Let me just pull up the list here. So, yeah, one of the questions we got, hi, we have multiple companies inside Fathom. Can we now duplicate the forecast we made from one company to another? It's a great question. The short answer is no, not currently. There's not a way to easily copy a forecast from one company to another. So that's definitely something we'll take on board and hope to build as functionality. Thanks for your question.
Can I speak to that too, James, real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
What we found to be helpful is, and we were just working on a project today where there's 12 locations that we are consolidating into a single picture. And we want similar drivers to be kind of pushing the numbers through each of the individual locations of this business. And what we found to be the fastest way to get up and running essentially is we can create a driver import template. And so we can have all the driver categories and structures and even the values plugged in already. So when we import them, it's the final step is just connecting some of the formulas to the profit and loss, for instance. So if you're driving revenue, it's a way to at least shortcut some of the build from scratch piece of it. And then once you build a report, it's easy to share it across all of the underlying entities within the same account. So I'm a big fan, to be honest, of building from scratch, even though it is time consuming. What ends up happening is you only create what's necessary for that business. So I love the idea of shortcuts, James. It sounds like in the product roadmap, there's room for maybe, building out off of a template of some kind. But it's still worth doing the groundwork to just build the model. So the alternative that we see that we really want to push against is businesses saying, well, we want to grow 18% over last year. And it's the only way they're calculating that is we're taking revenue from last February and we're multiplying it by 1.18 and getting this February's revenue. And that's too much of a fingers crossed approach. It's too much of a, let's just hope, we want to drive the revenue through specific actionable components that we can actually then measure in the report and benchmark against month after month.
Got it. That's super helpful. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, the next question actually kind of it's a good piggyback off that. From John, we are a membership-based company. Can we use the non-financial KPIs membership to drive our revenue or scenario? You want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so a lot of times we are measuring the same metric that we want as a driver. We want to measure, in the report section and you saw it in the acquisition cost, for instance. So really, those are two, we have to kind of work with the numbers from two separate places within the Fathom platform. But essentially, you just need to make sure that it's matching, that whatever the assumption is driving the revenue. We always start there. So when we build out our forecast, we always start with what's really, what are the building blocks, for this business that makes it unique. And so once we build that, we look at the driver list, and that helps us understand also, based on some of that experimentation of, well, what really leads to the best future outcome when somebody, for instance, businesses running on EOS as an example, it's, you set these 1, 3, 10-year targets. We want to align whatever the model is saying with these long-term goals. So we want to take components from, whatever scorecard measurable metric that you're tracking, that you're saying, this is what I'm doing that is going to get me to this future outcome. Once we see which controls and levers really have the greatest positive influence to accelerating, hitting that end goal, that end result, that's what helps us determine what we need to end up measuring and kind of monitoring in the report section. So ideally, and James, you can speak to the technical side of this, but, ideally, we're able to work with just one set of import, but right now it's coming from two directions. There's a Google Sheet API connection that we use to bring in some of the non-financial actual results. So it ends up syncing just like the financial data. So it's automatic, which is great. Remove the human error as much as possible. But yeah, so I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. But I would add, just from the Fathom angle, we would love to see kind of unifying the non-financial and the drivers together within Fathom, because currently, like you said, they're sort of separate things you import, but actually being able to tie them together is something we are very interested in doing. So at the moment, they're separate. You can track a non-financial, you can track a driver, but they don't necessarily tie in Fathom. But in the future, we hope to change that. Yep. Let's see. You had a question on the report you had, Ben. What are the 6 questions that the report addresses? And can we please have a copy of the report to see the full questions and report structure?
Yeah, I'm happy to export the report. I can add some text to it that's helpful. The list of questions we covered, in detail. It was essentially, I can read them off right now if that's helpful. But the ones that we kind of talked about here were, list them out. So when can I afford to hire the next person? When can I afford to expand the location? When can I afford to pay myself more with confidence, right? So those were 3 of the micro forecasts that we included in the roadmap. What would happen if we change our prices? What happens if costs go up? And what happens with increased sales if we have to hire more people to support that, right? So those were a handful of questions, and then we kind of just showed how we answered 3 of them in the roadmap and micro forecast, 3 of them using scenarios and drivers, and then really using the map review each month to kind of make sure we stay on track. So that's kind of the final bucket there is like, okay, it's great that we map all this stuff out, but ultimately, how are we going to know that we're moving down the path in the right way? And so the reality is you have to choose, like, which storyline are we going to try to follow? Like, what's that kind of blue line, middle of the road one that we want to say, like, this is every month when the books close out, we want to compare actually what happened versus what we thought was going to happen. We're a big fan of rolling forecasts as well. So the idea of, setting a budget at the beginning of the year and still comparing yourself against it 10 months later, that feels antiquated and unhelpful, to be honest. When you get into the year and you say, well, we're not on track to our annual budget that we set. It's, well, more now. Like, you've learned so many more things 6 months into a year. So we're big fans of actually just as we learn and apply new changes to the drivers, make adjustments, and create new scenarios, we're always resaving the forecast as a budget, right? So we're always then saying, like, when we get here again next month and we have another chance to kind of look at where we're at on this road, we want to compare against what the best information and the best picture that we knew to be true at the most recent date. And so we never are comparing against something that's 8 months ago, because there's just always too much opportunity to learn and adapt. And to me, that's the energy that's missing from looking at financials when your bookkeeper or accountant is sending you, hey, here are your books, James, from January. That's not fun. Like, let's make it fun, because there's actually an opportunity to connect what you're doing today with, like, wow, if we can work really hard, we're going to show back up to do the work again, tomorrow. And it's just a lot more energizing to see that you're on track towards something that matters and you're not just on the hamster wheel.
Yep. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, we've got quite a few questions here. So if we don't get to your question, we will be sure to follow up with you after the webinar, but let's see if we can get through a few more here. Let's see.
Also, James, I see you shared the hot sauce report right there. I mentioned this in the webinar. We did a 3-part series where I walked through the details of how we built the driver sections and how we did that. That was, I think, in 2023. So that was coming up on 2 years ago, which is wild. We've updated it and changed a lot of the inputs and components. And so the report that we have from today's webinar has different examples and different questions that we'll make sure we can get everybody access to. I'm happy to connect with folks too. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn or email me, Ben at amplify.business. I'm happy to chat. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Get in touch with Ben for sure. Question from Peter here. How far is Fathom incorporating AI into the model? So great question. Obviously a big topic at the moment. What we have in the Fathom forecast right now is not what you would call AI. It is a statistical model. So essentially a linear regression. We call it the SMART forecast, and it does incorporate seasonality. So it's looking at the past results. It's plotting kind of a line of best fit based on the trajectory of those results. And then also layering on monthly seasonality changes that it picks up. So that's how kind of the SMART forecast works at the moment. We certainly may incorporate more AI features into the forecast in the future. It's something we're looking into heavily right now across the product, not just forecasting, but also reporting. So that's a big area of development and exploration. But yeah, that would be my answer. Ben, would you add anything to that?
I mean, my feeling around AI, it's and automation in general, and Fathom, as you know, we started in Excel spreadsheets, and then this is leaps and bounds ahead, right? So from where we started 10 years ago. So I'm a big fan of how technology can create efficiencies and tee up new insights. What will never be taken away is the need for one human to sit with another human and understand what the desires are for the business, and hold the hand of another person as they're making a hard decision with something that they've worked so hard to build. So yes, an algorithm might tell you, here's the formula for success. And you can already hear that on some podcasts of like, you're growing, just go get venture capital money. Just get, we started Amplify out of work in the due diligence process of private equity. And so I was sitting down with business owners, and it was like they had been told the formula, like they've seen too many episodes of Shark Tank, and they are trained to come sell part of their business just to get, that's going to solve everything, right? At the end of the day, though, you're just still sitting with hard decisions that, well, how does that apply to my business though? Right. And so I think using a tool and having a relationship with somebody to help you interpret it with empathy and validate what recommendations are being made. I think that is what, as we think about AI, there's not going to be a magic button. There's going to be a need to provide empathetic validation and a relationship with someone to thoughtfully, support and ask questions. Yeah.
And also to piggyback off that, someone to explain the methodology, someone to explain what when it went into this, all the assumptions in this forecast, right? Everyone who's served a forecast wants to know what went into this, what assumptions were made. And that's a good segue into a question from Tomas. Is there a way to audit changes, see who and when changed a formula? So there is an audit trail in the forecast. You can see who's made changes. And when you report on the forecast, there's an assumption report essentially that will show the assumptions made in that model that was built. So yeah, incredibly important to be transparent about how that forecast came to be, and those features do exist in Fathom, and you can audit changes. Okay, question from Annie. This is a great question. I bet a lot of people are feeling this. Annie said, creating those models can be challenging for business owners with no accounting and finance background. Does Fathom offer some sort of assistance with creating models? It's a great question. So what our team provides is product training. So we can, if you want to use Fathom on your end, we can train you on how to use the product, how to set up your forecast, and we can support you on that journey. So we've got a great help center, a great support team who's very responsive and knowledgeable. They're awesome. Highly recommend leaning on them. And then we also have account managers who can help you on your journey. But the employees at Fathom, we're not going to be experts on creating a model for a specific business. So where that expertise is needed, someone like Ben is awesome. We do have kind of a list of preferred advisors that are certified on Fathom that we can refer to, and Ben is one of the folks who we send a lot of businesses to who just need some help when they're setting up the forecast. So that's what I would say.
I have a soft spot in my heart for the business owners who don't love numbers, who are looking at this going, I need to be able to answer some of these questions, but I didn't study finance. I didn't start my business because I love spreadsheets. Come talk to me. I love you already. But I'll say, like, the Fathom team is amazing for the technical issues. Lean in to the Fathom support team because they're awesome. And I almost think in terms of, I have a music background, so I always think in terms of Fathom is building the instrument, but they're not necessarily the ones who will make music with it, right? That's our job. Like, we want to make it, create the songs and the music that are unique to us and to each business. They're going to help make sure everything's in tune and it's technical and everything's functioning correctly from a tool standpoint.
Absolutely. Let's see, another product question, and I know we're over time here, so probably just answer a couple more and then wrap things up. But let's see, one from Sarah. Where can you find the audit trail in Fathom in the forecast? I think Sarah means. So one way to find it is if you go into the forecast main grid, if you're in there, and you go to forecast settings, and then under the general settings area, there should be a download option to download the forecast value audit. And so it's basically an Excel report, and it'll have an audit of all the assumptions made in there. So that's probably the best way to do it. And if that didn't kind of come through, feel free to just reach out to our support team, and they'll be happy to direct you to where to find that. support@fathomhq.com. But that is where you can find it. Let's see, any other questions?
I see one, James. I see one.
Oh, go for it.
No, it's the one I submitted.
Oh, let's see. One from Carly. Can you import a KPI list from one company to another? Yeah. So Carly, I think probably what you're referring to there is copying KPIs from one company to another, like using the same ones on two companies, and you can absolutely do that. Basically by adding those KPIs to the library, and then you can share them. You can share them over that way. Let's see. One funny one for you, Ben. When will hot sauce be available to Fathom users?
now are the actual
actually
hot
don't know
sauce,
if that's
or is
that's
it
funny or
is
not.
it the demo account that I created? That's the question I had. I read that as the demo account. So
Yeah,
but
it could be your hot sauce dropping.
here, Melinda's ghost pepper hot sauce that's where it's at for me. So
Agreed. Yeah, that demo company, I think it would probably be difficult to share, but I
yeah,
bet we can probably share that sample report at
yeah,
least.
yeah.
Um, let's see, another one to go through here. Let me just find the other questions here. How should I think about how drivers and scenarios and micro forecasts are connected? It's a great question. You want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, so it's complicated because there are different parts of the business, or the Fathom. There's the driver section right along the financial statements. Then you have, the scenarios. Like the order we do things, just if that's helpful, is, we're always, once we connect the financials, we're looking first at, okay, how do we now go in? We're starting with revenue. Like that's where we start building our drivers, and we say, how do we think revenue by revenue stream potentially is going to be generated through assumptions like marketing spend, organic seasonality, past existing subscribers. Like we try to go from like a unit up approach. So we think of drivers first as kind of populating the P&L, and then we go line by line through it and really set the value rules. And I think in the 3-part series where we built the hot sauce account, we go into great detail with that. So that creates the baseline model, and that's really the most important step. There is the smart forecast button. We don't use that because, again, it's making a lot of decisions that I might not totally understand. So going back to even AI, it's like if we're hitting the magic button and we don't know exactly why and how some of the values are created, that can feel a little bit risky because you aren't totally bought in on exactly why a number is predicting a certain way. So we like to go line by line. And once we create the baseline, that gives us that blue line down the middle. So like that's where we start to go into the report section and say, okay, let's create some visuals that capture this blue line picture. And we can say, like, this is really the baseline. If we don't change anything and we just keep going, here's the baseline. That's where there's an opportunity to then go into the roadmap and start thinking about, okay, now what decisions are you thinking about making in your business? So we've captured, here's your current trajectory if you don't do anything. Now here are all the decisions you're thinking about. So let's capture all of those, and we might create more drivers in that process, right? Because we're saying, well, we're going to tie cost of goods, or there's some different assumptions of headcount or whatever. And then once we have baseline forecasts and some micro forecasts in the roadmap, that's where then we can say, okay, let's push this different directions now. So let's create a new scenario, and not just for the sake of creating new scenarios. I mentioned something in the report section, like don't fill your shopping cart with all the stuff. Don't just be smart with what you end up putting on your report, because again, especially for business owners who are not really comfortable navigating complicated numbers, what's really important is that it really is a gift to curate what's presented in a way that doesn't create more noise or chaos. Like it's already chaotic growing a business. So let's simplify it, make it clean, beautiful, presentable. But that's where when we create a new scenario, it's not just so we can make more lines on the graph, right? Or the tables or visuals in the report. It's to answer a very specific question. And it's okay to start with just saying, what happens if revenue goes up by 10%? So you can duplicate. I mentioned this on the micro forecast, the power of duplicating and being able to capture, a structure that you've already created. And so you can duplicate off of any forecast or a scenario that you've created, and then push it different directions. Like revenue is going to go up 10%. Revenue is going to go down 10%. That's a quick way to really start to see the impact of just if revenue changes at the top of your financial, dominoes, like this is how it's going to flow down into the cash on hand ultimately. So that's sort of the sequence that we apply the different parts. And as you noticed, even in the demonstration, there's kind of like, we're clicking around a lot. And so you know, just remember, anytime you're making changes in drivers or scenarios and you go back to the report, you need to refresh. You just, otherwise you're going to get confused because you're going to say, well, I made all these changes and then I'm not seeing them. Don't look past the refresh button. It's just a, you know, one thing to remember. So
that's great, Ben. I think last question here, we got to most of them, but Carly asked, can you put a link to building the forecast for hot sauce? Wondering what the best we can do there in terms of resources is, Ben. Do you have any good ideas?
The question was around the previous webinar trainings, or because is that the
good
question? Sorry.
I'm not 100% sure, but we could definitely provide that, at least
I mean, I think
trainings.
the way we built it, we walked step by step, and there was actually 3 webinars because it does take time to build and explain, obviously. But you know, if you're just getting started, like our goal in even creating a webinar about practical questions is to show what's possible so that the technical journey of getting comfortable using the tool is worth it. And you see that you know, you're not just tasked with like, oh, you got to learn a whole new system, a whole new way of looking at numbers. We want to just say, like, look what you can do once you learn it. Okay, so it is complicated. My daughter's 12 years old. She's learning guitar. It for a while took a lot, you know, but now she's writing songs, singing, and she's got it, right? So there's a point where you get comfortable with it and you start making music with the tool. We wanted to show you how you can make music. It's worth learning how to play the instrument. Okay, so that's what I want to leave people with. So the webinar was really walking through how to get comfortable using the instrument. I think this is more about like, look at the kind of music you can play with it. And it, you know, the challenge with the demo account, you know, like James, you were saying, we can't quickly just go, hey, everybody can go play around with all these numbers. But it's something that we created just for, honestly, we use it when we present to businesses who are wanting help with forecasting. We want to be able to demonstrate, here are the types of questions we're going to be able to help you answer.
Totally makes sense. So I think probably good next step for folks who want to kind of take the next step in learning the forecasting is going back and watching those webinars we did previously with Ben. So I put a link to those in the chat on Ben's page, but we'll also follow up when we follow up with everyone who registered for this webinar today. We'll include a link to that content as well, so you guys can take a next step. But yeah, really appreciate everyone being here today, and really appreciate your time, Ben. Thanks for doing this with us. Look out for future webinars. We'd love to hear any feedback you have. If you have any ideas for next type of webinar you'd like to see or further training, definitely let us know. But yeah, really appreciate your time. And Ben, I think we wrap it up there.
Awesome. Thank you, James.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you, everyone.